So welcome everybody to the RMI online seminar today. It's fantastic to see you all. I'd like to welcome especially Anne Gausdal, of course, our guest today. I'm Guido Möllering. I'm kind of your host today, but I will not be chairing the main part. I will hand over to Tina Azad in a moment. But at the start, I would just like to give you the usual technical reminders. We are recording this session and very happy to see you on camera, but if you like to stay anonymous, of course, it's also fine. Please keep your mics on mute unless you're speaking, and please use the chat for any comments or questions during the presentation or also during the discussion. And later on, when it gets more interactive in the Q&A, please use this yellow hand or brown hand that used to be a blue hand to indicate that you'd like to speak, and then we'll call you up. So if we look at the list of participants or already the registrations we received, we're really excited. It's a very, very international group today. We're so happy. We have, like, from the very north of Europe and the world, Spain, very far north, all the way to South Africa, at least. University of Cape Town is represented today. We have Brazil, we have people registering from the US, and with our Asian guests tonight, I'm not sure if they're actually based in China or these places at the moment, but for sure Peter and others. So we have all continents and many different national cultures of trust research represented in network research. So that's very exciting for us. And it's, of course, one of the bonuses of having to do everything online now, because very few of you would probably have come all the way to Witten for the talk today. So it's very, very happy to see you on the screen, because we wouldn't have met otherwise tonight. Of course, it would have been so much nicer to be here in person. But thanks for joining, and please come back if you like our research seminars, of course. So the topic today is very dear to me, as many of you may know who know me and what I've been working on over all these years. But also our guest, Anne, is very dear to me, because we go back a long time now, almost 10 years that we've been in touch and become friends. And so it's very special that you are our guest today. I mean, we met at a workshop in Roskilde, I think, in 2011. And well, not so long afterwards, you visited me in Bremen. So this is a picture from 2012. You came to visit me in Bremen not so long after I had my first position there, my first professorship there. And then not so long after I got the job here in Witten, you also came to visit, which I remember very fondly, together with our co-authors, Helge Svare. And so yes, it's been a long time connection with us, and that is why it's a special occasion for me, Anne. So welcome to you, just on that personal note. And now I'm very happy to hand over to Tina Azad from our institute, from the Reinhard Mohn Institute, as our chair for the session today.
Yeah, thank you, Guido.
Welcome, everybody. Yeah.
Thank you, Guido. And also from my side, hello to everyone. And also warm welcome again to our guest, Anne Gausdal. And before I further introduce you, Anne, I would like to say a few words to myself. I'm working as a research assistant for now 2.5 years at the RMI. And within my PhD project, I investigate how third parties, and there more precisely network managers, facilitate trust and cooperation in innovation networks. And I further investigate why and how innovation networks that are facilitated by third parties succeed or fail. And yeah, you might see some similarities between the research of Anne and myself. And this is what also brings me to explain you a little bit further this kind of research seminar. because this type of seminar provides us all a forum to discuss latest research findings and research in general that connects our institute, the RMI, with the ones of our guests. And yeah, coming to our guest now, it is an honor to introduce you, Anne. Anne, you are Professor of Organization, Management and Innovation at the Department of Leadership and Organization at Kristiania University in Norway. And you're also Vice Dean of Research at the university. And of course, you've published several articles in international journals such as Industry and Innovation, and also together with Guido Möllering and other colleagues, the latest one you published in 2020 together. And I personally am very interested in your articles on the role of network orchestrators and how managers facilitate trust in innovation networks. And interestingly, before you did your PhD, you studied bioengineering and also had a lot of practical experiences in that area. And after you finished your PhD in 2008, you engaged in a lot of action research in the field of network management and innovation networks. And I think this is especially interesting for all of us to listen from your experiences. And yeah, I'm very happy and excited that you are here today, because I think that trust and collaboration in innovation networks is a very interesting and timely topic. I mean, that's why I'm also studying it. And yeah, I would say the stage is yours.
Thanks a lot for the invitation. First of all, can you hear me? Good. Thanks to Guido and Tina for this very nice introduction. I'm also very happy for the collaboration with both of you, Tina the last year and Guido for many years, as you explained. Actually, our relationship is a result of a network itself, because the Roskilde seminar you mentioned, it was an event in a Nordic network of trust researchers. And for instance, Svein Tvedt Johansen, a professor at Arctic University of Norway, he was also there. So it's a result of networking, and I'm not sure if she's here, but she's invited, May-Britt. She introduced us to each other, Guido. Yeah, at the breakfast table, actually, at the hotel before the seminar started. So yeah. I also want to say that this is for Kristiania University College. This is, and perhaps hopefully also for Witten, it's Witten-Herdecke. It's an important event because this is the first activity in our newly Erasmus plus agreement. So that we made just 1 year back or something in the fall. Yeah. So, but now I want to start the presentation. Hopefully you can see the presentation on the full screen.
Yes, it's all
yes?
right.
Good. So you have already heard my name and my role. I also want to emphasize that Tina mentioned it actually, that I've also done a lot of interactive research, action research, and I worked for very many years at the University of Southeastern Norway, and I know that some of my colleagues and actually also my boss from that period is here today. And I was a representative for the university in different university in industry activities, and these activities were all related to different networks. So I started with the networks of electronics industry, and actually did my PhD on that, and then I continued with different other networks. So the picture of the small group that you see on this front page is from the water cluster, and this is actually from a board meeting. So you can see me sitting there in dark clothes. So it's a symbol of activity together with the network, the real networks. And I think that's one of the features in the research I will present today that might differ a little bit from some others, but I have worked in practice with a lot of the things I will explain in practice, and actually, especially Helge Svare and myself, we have kind of done real life experiments on the networks. We have tried out different ways of trust building, and we have seen how it works, and we have adjusted and then conceptualized it and published on it. So that was the background. And now I start with potatoes. We think that potatoes is very Norwegian, but it hasn't been here for very many 100 years, actually. What has potatoes to do with innovation? You see this smiling guy, his name is Max, and he's the CEO of a system developer of inside the micro nanotechnology and electronics industry. And the other gentleman here is a farmer. And this story started in the upper corner here with a network activity. And in this meeting with a lot of people, there were people from the electronics industry, a network called Electronicos, and one of them was Max Tangen. It was also researchers from University of Southeastern Norway, and some people from a network within the agriculture sector. And one of the presentations on this event, I will explain the event a bit later today. He did his PhD in California, and he developed a sensor to measure when a grape is ready for being harvested to make wine. So he presented his research, and then a representative from the agriculture network raised his hand and said, is it possible to develop a sensor that can measure if a potato is rotten? And the researchers, they said, yes, that might be possible. And he said, because that's really a problem in our sector, because we store the potatoes in big boxes and tons of potatoes together. And if one starts to get rotten, it will transmit to the others, and we will lose a lot of the harvest. So if that is possible to monitor, that will be super. So a bit later on the same event, the same day, people were organized in groups, and one group were organized around this potato problem. So in that group, it's the second picture, people from the industry, researchers, and from the kind of customer here, which is the farmer, were together for 1 hour to develop the idea a bit further and to find out if it was kind of a foundation here in the group to go further with the problem, if they were lacking some other people or competences and different things. And then 6 months later, they had a prototype ready for the measuring the potato getting rotten, and also to measure the temperature and the humidity and everything that is important for farmers. 6 months after that, they had a product in the market, and it really took off regarding sales. So that was an innovation story that started with a network meeting. That was a little bit about the context. I will try to say something more about the context, because the main topic here is how trust and trust building may function in networks. And then it's important to know where the empirical studies that is behind all this research has taken place, and it has taken place in a Norwegian context. You can see Norway in red in the map. It's north of Germany, and it's also a high trust country. The general level of trust in this society is quite high, yeah, actually one of the highest. The studies are mostly qualitative, but we have some quantitative also data. It is elements of interactive or action research in it. And the networks are all around can you see the arrow? Around the Oslofjord area. And here's a map with the different networks are marked on the map. And they are from the health technology sector. Engineering coast is from the maritime engineering sector. The water bubble is the water cluster, Vannklyngen in Norwegian. The next one is from renewable energy. The globe is kind of a symbol for the IT industry. And then we also had a network within the creative industry from Vestfold Film Forum. And the last one is a symbol for the electronics industry. And you have seen this picture actually before today, Helge, co-author, and Guido and myself. So I don't need to say anything more about that. And we have, there are several publications behind this presentation. So I have a list here, and the ones in red are the most important. So the first one, actually it was published in Journal of Trust Research before you became the editor-in-chief, Guido. It was Peter Pingley at that time, and we had a nice and demanding collaboration on the paper. And then the next one was the three of us on the picture, Gausdal, Svare, and Møllering. And it was also published in Journal of Trust Research, and the last one with the same three of us in Industry and Innovation. So I will try now to open the black box a little bit on how trust may function in network. So the background here is that such interfirm networks, they are increasingly commonplace. Very many companies, they enter such networks, and the reason they do it is to get access to knowledge, ideas, or partners to become more innovative. And trust is one of several elements that explain variation in benefits from network participation. It's not the only one. But most studies on trust treat trust as a general phenomenon. And we wanted to contribute with a more nuanced understanding and look at different dimensions of trust. And then we decided to go for the ABI framework from Mayer, Davis, and Schulman. And this framework on ability, benevolence, and integrity was originally developed to address at interpersonal level, and we apply it in the context of networks. And in working with this paper, we discovered that we had to address two levels of trust. And I remember very well, we had a workshop in Guido's office in Witten-Herdecke, and we used Flipover to find out, okay, we don't fully understand what we are talking about, because some of the literature was on one level, one at another level. So then we discovered that actually we are talking about two different levels of trust in networks. The first one that we actually defined and called network trust is more at a general level in the networks, how the others trust the other members and how they perceive the general trust level climate in the network. The other one interorganizational trust is mainly at a dyad level between two organizations. And we wanted to study both. So the findings here is, or the data are both qualitative and quantitative, and the qualitative are the most important ones, and the quantitative was just to justify and to find out more. So the first one is that if you have a network with low levels of expertise, you will not attract good people. So we check, have they been in business long? Have they delivered interesting products? Have they organized themselves properly? So here it's a quotation that shows that other companies, before they enter a network, they test out the other companies and look at their products. But interestingly, from an organizational researcher, they also look at the organization itself. Are they efficient? So this is in blue color because it addresses ability. And the next quotation, I see that it may be strange for new network participants to share as much as we do. If benevolence was lacking, we would not share anything. So this is a quotation to tell about the openness, and in this network it is a lot of competitors together also, but still they see that if they share a lot, they get even more in return. The last quotation is related to integrity, to keep the promises and not misuse ideas, and to be honest. Then I go to the quantitative data, and you might see here that benevolence stands out as the most important dimension. And here all the companies from 5 networks are analyzed as a whole. What we also see is that so benevolence stands out regarding knowledge sharing, and 3 different variables regarding innovation: increased innovation efforts, more innovation collaboration, and network dependent innovation. Innovation wouldn't happen without the network. And then we also studied conflicts in the network, and we can see here that integrity is negative to conflict, which is quite natural. The conclusion of this work is that at the network level, trust based on perceived ability is a basic driver for network involvement. It must be a competence there that is attractive. But low levels of trust based on integrity and benevolence may neutralize the effect of ability. It doesn't matter if it's very much nice knowledge in there, if you can't trust them and if they don't want good to each other as benevolence. At the interorganizational level, trust based on perceived ability and integrity are significant conditions for involvement, but trust based on perceived benevolence functions as a facilitator for performance. So benevolence stands out at the most important dimension of trust. However, network trust is not enough to get benefits, to get innovation out of a network. It is a precondition that can cause a cause of cooperation. What we found in this second paper is that if trust coexists with cooperation, and the cooperation has some characteristics of rapport, informality, and sharing, then a positive circle of network cooperation and network trust may emerge. So this starts to work. And this circle can then influence the benefits of network participation. We also found that something regarding the trust building process that cooperation, with interactive workshops with other partners seem to be very important for trust building. And I now continue on how to build trust. So 5 trust creating processes were developed in a 3rd paper. And the empirical base of this paper is one network. It's the electronics network. And the first process is connections. So in order to create trust, people must be connected. And someone has to connect them. Something has to be organized so that people meet. You don't meet by accident when you work in different companies. So some kind of gatherings have to be organized. And it's smart to start with low-risk activities, to work in small groups, with also non-work and personal connections. The upper right picture here is from a dining and wining session with the water cluster after a seminar. Then we had dinner together. So people from different companies and also we, the facilitators. So, and with small groups, 3 to 5 is actually most ideal. Communication, to ensure frequent and rich communication. So, but how frequent the communication should be is under debate, and trusted weak ties, then you don't have contact too often, but it's high level of trust is the most efficient one. And the quality of the communication is to be collaborative, that you share ideas, you ask questions, you listen, so you develop things together, and the communication is collaborative. And to meet face to face is also the best way of communicate, because the communication is richer, if possible. Of course, the last years it hasn't been very, very possible. Direction is to have a shared vision or goal or shared language. So in several of these networks, the different network activities, events that we have organized, they have been given different names. For instance, the workshop where the potato case was developed is called Tenketank in Norwegian, or think tank in English. And then people in the networks, they started to discuss about the think tank. For instance, in the next think tank, we should have demanding customers, which customer to invite, and this kind of thing. So they had some kind of common language that was developed in the network. Temporary groups. Swift trust may develop over short, intensive periods of interaction in temporary groups. That is known from the trust literature, and it's here added as a process. And here, knowledge is built faster than usual, because they have to come to the solution quite quick. So, and this process is going even better when it's well-defined roles. People know what to do. And resource sharing, to take risks in sharing time, expertise, and different types of knowledge, access to a limited or sensitive resources, and let others access your personal network contacts. In the upper picture, with the people with the helmets, this is from plant of that is treating hazardous waste landfill, and it was an event for the water cluster out at this plant, and they in the workshop after this guided tour and explanation, then the plant told us that they had problems because they had a lot of water that was polluted, and they wanted to rinse it in a more environmentally friendly way, and they asked the others for advice. And then actually 2 different companies, they wanted to collaborate with them, and they also shared their personal network contacts. It was an other organization with the same problem that was solved in a way in Gothenburg in Sweden, so they wanted to help this plant with finding out how to solve it. So the last picture at the bottom is from an event at the University College, where the different companies, where it was organized with connections, so different companies were there, and also students within engineering, so they could learn more how to apply their education in this industry when they were finished. So it was connection between companies and students, but also between the companies. So then I will go to some practical methods. Practical turn, as Davide Nicolini has kind of asked for, how to create trust in networks. So 3 different methods. The first one, network reflection, is an educational concept for network as a part-time management education, which is very inter-organizational and a lot of network activities and reflection. For instance, after a lecture on learning arenas, the participants were divided in groups to find out in what way are the meetings that I organize in my company, they were managers, how does it have some qualities that can be related to a learning arena? And then they came back in plenary and reported their findings. And actually more than one of the managers, they told in the group that actually I found out that none of my meetings are functioning as a learning arena. I really have to do something with it. So I share it with you now because it's really a sign of trust. They tell weaknesses from their own practice to their fellow students at this course. Then network-based innovation brokering, that was the method that was used in the potato case. And that's a method to help businesses and R&D institutions to initiate joint innovation projects. And it has 3 main phases, and the most important one is a 1-day workshop. And I've already told you a bit about how such a workshop is functioning. First, plenary, sharing ideas from different groups of participants, and then group work in temporary groups with clear roles and a deadline. So it's an arena for creating swift trust that might be developed later to more lasting trust. And to come back to the potato history, with this firm, 7 Cents, that entered the network and the network-based innovation brokering event, that in popular is called Think Tank. Actually, if you go to their homepage, you can see that now they're directing all their products to the agriculture sector. And before the workshop I mentioned, 7 years back, they had no products towards this sector, and the company is growing, and it's Norwegian, and it's actually also all the products are developed in Norway according to their website. So, and one of the big success products is irrigation system to get water to the fields. So instead of 3 people working on shifts throughout the season, they now have everything is automated. The sprinklers are moved by some sensors and of course, some machinery. Then the last method, network IGP, is a very flexible method. IGP is acronym for individual, group, and plenary reflections. And it consists of 4 different phases. You can see in the table at the down page. And it starts with a preparation process where the participants are divided in groups, but they share some personal information. For instance, my favorite hobby. This is based on trust literature. If you know something a bit personal, don't need to be private, then you can connect more easily and trust is more easily built. After that, individual reflection. So you start without talking. But you have a question or topic problem to work on. And after that, group reflection. But there we start with this very structured talking rounds. So everybody are asked to say something. And I've done this, I don't know how many times, at least 100 in very many different sectors and contexts. And I've never experienced that people don't want to talk. When they have reflected, they want to share. And the time for talking is limited, for instance, 1 minute. And then you go around until everybody has said what they want to say. So it's actually very democratic because all are invited, but also that people that are normally dominating, they don't get the chance to do that so much. And you get, for instance, perhaps the silent persons are those with the best ideas. So to get more knowledge into the circulation, and then plenary in the end. And to see how this last method corresponds with the trust building processes, and I'm coming close to the end now for your information. Then we see that in the network IGP activity, people work together in small groups and they build relationships and know competence. For instance, in the picture here, illustration, the female with the long hair, she has a PhD within water chemistry, and the gentleman next to her is the CEO of a competitor, and they discussed a problem in the competitor's company, the CEO's company, and the PhD from the neighbor and competing company shared a lot of her competence, perhaps not all, but as an example of working in small groups. And the 2 others, one of them is myself as a facilitator, and the other is a professor from University of Southeastern Norway. So this corresponds to connections, the trust building process. Then sharing ideas and suggestions like these 4 people did together, and collaborative communication, and to meet quite regularly is corresponding to the trust building process communication. Then in some of the networks here, network IGP is used to develop a shared direction and strategy for the network, and also for network teams in the water cluster. So it was used to set the direction, and the process also has this short period of interaction in temporary groups with well-defined roles and rules, which is temporary group process. And the last process, resource sharing, is that participants, they are sharing time, ideas, stories. And actually some of the activities took place at different plants. For where they could see different equipment. So they also started to share, because some of the companies, they had equipment that was really expensive to buy, and then they could found ways of sharing it. Others, they found ways of actually sharing people, because in some periods they have low activity in some sectors, and in others they have high activity, and it is not always the fact that they have these ups and downs at the same time. So then they can also share actually people with each other. I found a system for handling that lower part of it also. So that was my presentation.
Thank you very much for your interesting insights. And right now, I don't see any questions within our chat, but I think that our audience has a lot of questions to you. So we kindly invite you to ask your questions. So you can raise your virtual hand and just start asking questions. I guess it can be directly to the three introduced papers, but maybe also to more general work of Anne, so whatever comes into your mind. But I see the first question. Please go ahead.
Hi, is that me? Can I go?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much for your presentation. I was wondering if you have any data based on all these years of research that can link the level of trust in the network to the innovativeness of the network. Is there any relationship from your perspective connecting trust and innovation?
Yeah, we have in this paper with the qualitative data, we have measured on a Likert scale, not the different also ability, benevolence, and integrity. And I have the numbers. Yeah, if you want, so then I can share them, because in case some questions will come up, I have.
Or just a qualitative, just perception wise, do you think it's actually, is it as related as we think it is, or is as perceived it's meant to be?
Yeah, it's what we found there is like the level on a Likert scale was about 4 point something for ability and for integrity, and it was lower for benevolence, so it takes more time to develop. But what we also saw in some other data is that one of the networks we investigated, they had a high level of trust but low level of innovation, and that was a very interesting finding. Even we were very surprised, but okay, so you have a high level of trust but you don't innovate. And then we found out that the reason was that they don't collaborate. So that was helped us to develop this circle of trust and collaboration and benefits. So when you have both trust and collaboration, then it creates a circle between trust and collaboration, because when you trust more, you collaborate more. And we also saw that the people that answered the questions, they were mostly from the HR department. So the production part of the companies, they were very little involved in the network meetings. So very, very few, or if any, collaboration projects that were kind of risky and where trust was important. So no innovation came out, and I think 2 years later, this network actually stopped. Yeah, it was taken down because it didn't give anything. It just actually took, because network participation is also a cost in regarding time and in engagement. And even if you don't know what you get back and when you get it, you need to have something. And network is not the kind of goal itself. It's more a kind of mean to achieve something else. Even if it can also be nice and fun and give some kind of energy. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Okay, the next question. Guido, you were raising your hand, or?
No, but Anna then explained it, and but there is a question in the chat from. Let me just make it a bit more. Can you see it, Tina? Do you want to? Would you like to introduce it? No. Oh,
Right,
this
now
is
I
only
don't
to me.
see it. Yeah.
This is only to
Private
me. Sorry.
message.
And Nazli Vasti, hello, cannot use her camera at the moment, so she's written her question in the chat. And she says, thank you for a very useful presentation. Would you comment on what mechanisms we could use for low generalized trust contexts? More of the same? Thanks. So I think, Anna, when you mentioned at the beginning that Norway is such a high trust context, well, what would you guess for low trust contexts? What could be done there? Could your models be applied there? Should one at least try, or is it unlikely, in your opinion, that the same would work there?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and it's very relevant. And we have also said in the limitations that this has to be tested out in low trust contexts because we don't know how it functions. But also, before we started, actually, the part-time education with these network managers, since they were from competing companies, we met so much, or I met so much skepticism at the university with my colleagues and other researchers that this will not work because people they will not share. So you are kind of very idealistic, but we don't believe it will work. But something happens when people meet in the same room at the same time. So then they lower the guard, is the experience, but they don't lower it totally, but it's lower than else. And so then you share more, and actually these people from these different companies during the course and the experiences with the other companies, they discovered that actually they were not directly competitors because they had different segments in the market. And so actually many of them, the most competing area was actually related to competence in the region to get the best and smartest heads in their company. So so that's what I can, well, perhaps someone else in the community here can have some experiences that might be useful. I know that NC.
I think we should just take the next comment. We just put it on the list, Tina, and
Yes.
maybe people can then later on come back to this point.
The next one is Leona Henry.
Sure. Okay. So thank you, Anna, and nice to see you again. Thank you for your interesting presentation. I was going to ask something that you already partly answered in the last question, but I was kind of wondering, with your experiences on trust also being, let's say, harmful for innovation, whether you have seen that in some of your studies, and if so, yeah, if you can tell a little bit more about that, because it's actually something that's that I'm very curious about. So can you say something about that? I think you're still on mute.
Yeah. So what we got in the qualitative data interviews was stories about misuse of information, stealing of ideas, and that resulted in people leaving the network and conflicts. So it is, yeah. So in sometimes it's misused, and also I think there is an optimal level of trust here. If it's too high, you get too naive. So yeah. So was that the answer to the question?
Yes, thanks. Yeah, so I was just curious if you had seen that, and yeah, so you answered my question. Thanks.
Yeah, and that was also the reason why we studied. We also added conflict to the yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Then the next question comes from Peter Ping Lee.
Hi, my question probably also a reflection on the issue that the other cultures in other contexts may have a different kind of reactions, different measures, different ideas about trust. I wrote several papers on that one. I think particularly from East Asian perspective, they do not really rely too much on the ABI. They focus more on the social ties. I think they need to know each other. So I argue, I put that as a personalized, relationship-based kind of trust, in contrast to ABI, which is depersonalized and also relationship-free. You don't have to know each other very well to be good friends to know he's capable, his integrity, his benevolence. That's a reputation. And that's kind of a more, I would say, explicit knowledge. But I think in the East Asian perspective, they have to know the character of a person. They have to know each other for years before they can really trust. And I think that probably that will be meaningful, useful in the current VUCA conditions that you are talking about, ambiguity, tacitness, and so on and so forth. How can we trust without that explicit knowledge? And I think that has to be probably build up that relationship, and that will kind of have a long-lasting effect. So I think that will be something we can compare. I think it will be very interesting project for comparing the Western way of looking at the trust and the Eastern way. I think that has been really studied that specifically. But then I have a question for Anna. It's really about what would be your expectation of the role of trust in the ecosystem beyond what we call the dyadic interfirm relationship, because ecosystem tend to be the multi-interfirm relationship. It's a very complex relationship. I still believe that the trust must be something there, but I don't know how to handle that. Do you have any feel about that? Thank you.
Yeah, actually, I don't have I have some kind of ideas, but I don't have any research-based answer to give you. But I think this general level of trust in different societies that is measured by other researchers might make it more easy for some nations, because this is measured at the national level, to collaborate in the whole ecosystem. And what we see today globally is actually more tense between the nations, and yeah, the cultural differences you mentioned might play a role here. So I'm also sure it plays a role, and it's a big interest for societal trust now, and trust to the governments, because we have seen with the corona situation that in some countries people are kind of obeying the government and all the regulations, for instance in Norway, and in other countries they go to demonstrations and they don't want to listen. And yeah, so I think we have an opportunity these days to use the pandemic situation to find out more if we go for it. Yeah.
sorry if I may jump in here, but Peter, I would also like to comment on your comment and your question, if that's okay, Tina, because we're Tina, Azad, and Leona, and Henry, and I were also studying innovation networks in Germany, and so we can compare and connect a little bit also the Norwegian and the German experience and overall. And I would like to like make a general comment or observation on what is going on there and how I see it also based on our research. So if you have these innovation networks in Europe, the first thing is to get a pool of participants who are just coming together to find out if something is possible, right? So you really, that is your first trust step also. There needs to be enough trust that they think is not going to be dangerous. And I'm not even sure how much will come out of this, but of course I'm not going into anything that seems to be useless or even dangerous. So they need to have a sense that the other people are like decent and they are kind of interesting, competent, yeah, and also that the network management is you know, competent, and then this is kind of a forum that you'd like to join. But then the big problem is, how do you get them from having these nice network meetings with wining and dining and all of that to actually doing innovative projects in smaller groups? It's not expected that all members of the network do one innovation project together. They are created so that some of them hook up and do a project together that could be really, for their market, really important. And that is what they want to get to. But that is another hurdle, another level of trust or that you want to get to. And what we found out actually in the Norwegian case is that to get into these really productive and innovative projects, benevolence is needed. So first of all, you check out if people are competent. And then with the competent ones, you take the benevolent ones and really partner up with them. And of course, also before you want at least not malevolence, so the other side of benevolence, right? You want to be kind of safe, but then to really hook up, you need this higher level of trust. And that's why benevolence is not the only thing that matters, but is kind of decisive to get from just, you know, meeting to really making it happen. And that would be very interesting, Peter, if it would be the other way around in China. If you first kind of, within a pool, you identified the ones that you can build relationship with, and then in the next step, you find out if they're actually competent or not. It's very, I mean, the European way is to kind of first see if people are competent, and then if they're also nice, you kind of build a relationship with them. And maybe that's the other way around in Asia. I don't know. But at least in the innovation networks, maybe that's the same in other parts of the world, not just in Germany and Norway. First of all, it's getting people to even think about collaborating, and then to get them to actually collaborate. And that's what we're studying, and where different trust levels are involved and different forms of trust. If you use ABI, you know, it's also not my favorite, but it's useful, or something else. At least we need to talk about different forms of trust to be able to describe how this process of pooling and then partnering and making it happen and really getting innovative. So the first question also asked, like, does trust really make innovation happen? Well, without trust, it's difficult, but just because you have trust, you're not going to have a great innovation. So trust is not enough, as we say in one of our papers. Thanks. Long comment, but thanks.
Thank you. And I guess Anna has a direct comment to this before we continue with the other questions.
Yeah, I had a comment, but actually now I forgot it again, so I will come back. Yeah.
Okay, so maybe we continue with the other question first. So the next one is NC Road. Please go ahead.
Yeah, hello everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's such an exciting workshop. And thank you, Anne, for such a nice presentation. I want to just reflect on the low trust question, which raised up by Nazli, I guess. I did study trust in different contexts, in different countries, I would say, with different level of trust. However, I did not measure directly this one and compare these three countries. But from my practical or being involved in data collection and interacting between different nations, in the context of emergency management, which some would say, oh, trust has nothing to say, I realized, well, it has a lot to say. Because in Norway, as a very high trust country, we found out, or the data showed this trust could lead to more improvisation, so which indeed could lead to be innovative and learning outcome. However, on the other hand, in Canada, which is also kind of trust-based country, but in comparison to Norway is way lower, I found the interpersonal trust is very low between colleagues and between organizations. However, within the emergency management, organizations have no other choices than trusting each other. So there is a swift trust anyways. But when you're asking them, like deeping more information, you realize, okay, there is no much trust. They are doing it because there is no other option. So if you do invite them to join in a joint training, let's compare it as a network. So they come as an to participate and share and learn something. They are a bit like not willing to, unless it's states, it's national, the big one, and they are willing to participate. If it's small exercises, simulation exercises, none of them would come because they don't believe it's going to be useful, because they don't trust the other organizations going to share as much as they will. But it would be very interesting to compare it in other contexts than emergency management, which is kind of a must trust other organizations. It would be nice to see how it would react, but definitely there will be a big difference between low and high trust countries in terms of innovation or learning outcomes.
Thank you for your comment, and maybe we can also chat afterwards, because I also found in my innovation networks that improvisation might be a case in this network. So very interesting to hear that from you. And we have another question from Sven Johansson.
Yeah, hi, thanks Anna for an interesting presentation. I was just wondering if you know, because what you've looked at is basically networks where people, which are voluntary networks. And I'm thinking sometimes networks are not voluntary, and they're not, and you might have status differences between various members of the network, as well as different institutional logics. Like if you're in the public sector, people might work across different professional boundaries and so forth. And I'm just thinking, would that, have you any thoughts about how extending your research to those kind of networks would sort of change the trust dynamics, or for instance, status differences? How does this differences in status impact information development and trust in these types of networks? I just think it would be interesting extension, possibly. So
can I answer, Tina?
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. So actually, that's related to what Ensi mentioned, because we have studied it together in the emergency sector, and there people, hospitals and firefighters and all the emergency personnel, they have to collaborate. They don't choose their partners. It's given because it's regionally organized. So so it's a very different type of network, and I think the mechanisms are also a bit different. And as Ensi told, the swift during handling a crisis, the swift trust is very, very strong, and because they have to collaborate. But what we saw was there are different types of training. Organizations that train together to learn and to function better when things happen. And also, I think these trainings are more or less voluntary. If it's decided that there will be a big exercise, you have to be there. And what we found was different patterns of trust building for different types of exercises. So the full scale exercises where everything is big and people normally they don't actually meet, they communicate by radio or something. And then we have this other type of exercises called tabletop, where they come together and it's more a kind of simulation. And their trust is more built. What we also found was that then they train and then something happens and they develop swift trust. And there is a phase afterwards, kind of evaluation. And that phase has a huge potential to develop the swift trust and to learn from each other. And what we saw, you have to compliment me and say if I'm not getting all the details, was that this phase was very much neglected. And if they did evaluations, they did it within the organizations and they didn't share. But the context we studied was also a bit different because it was several nations involved. It was Iceland, Norway, and to some degree Russia, and in another study also Canada. So there might be many other variables, so they are not comparable. But interesting question and interesting to follow up, because I'm quite sure that this work different in different settings, and in the kind of networks that I've studied the most, and is most the foundation for this presentation is networks which is volunteers to participate in, and they are actually quite loosely organized, and the network itself doesn't have more power than the benefits of being there. You can't force people to go to networks. So then trust is actually, I think, even more important when you don't have to go. That's what I think. And also, I remember now what I was going to mention to Peter Ping Lee. That was something that is in the papers, but not, I didn't mention it. It is the firm size. I think that matters, because in the Norwegian context, there are many small enterprises. So it's we studied, all the networks we studied with was small and medium-sized enterprises. And we see that size is important, because the smaller you are, the more you are dependent on the collaboration with others. If you are very big and have your own R&D department and everything, you don't need the collaboration that much. So we also saw that in our material, and it was, but I didn't mention it. It was on one of the slides. Yeah.
Okay, now we have two hands. I think, Peter, you might have a comment directly to that.
Yeah, I think I would respond to Gado's comment, but I think it's very interesting to see the kind of, how to say, the evolution kind of from a ability to integrity, then higher level at the benevolence. So I maybe probably there will be kind of theoretical significance so that we can break down ABI into two tier. The first order kind of a trustworthiness, and then have second order, higher order trustworthiness, where benevolence could be potentially the linkage between the West and the East. I think benevolence would be a very interesting, that I think all the Asian countries, actually, they rely on that as well, because the personal relationship has a lot to do with the benevolence. I think that also interestingly enough, most of the entrepreneur startup the teams, they tend to cluster around their old classmates, schoolmates, and their colleagues. So then I think just as the opposite of Gado's argument, they probably the West, they start from strangers, and then they build up their higher relationship among the smaller groups. And in the Asian country, they tend to start with a smaller group, then expand into others, which they need the ability then to bring them in. And maybe because they're friends through the social networks. I think that's interesting to compare the two. Maybe the connection is really the benevolence, that the people must have that kind of a shared interest. They're willing to share the costs and the benefits, and they are not selfish And I think that has a lot to do with, I remember once we had invited Williamson to comment on his research on whether the trust can be part of the economics. And of course, he insisted that trust has nothing to do with economic transactions. And of course, we take issue with that. I think that trust probably here, the benevolence could be, I would say, the core of the trust issue. I think have a lot to do with the voluntary disclosure of information, open sharing. That would be helpful for the improvising and also for this innovation out of diversity, different views. And I think they can have this combination of different views, which is really kind of core feature of innovation. So it's very interesting to see that they inspire me to think about that maybe ABI can be broken down into 2 tiers, first order, second order. Then that could be connected to between the East and the West. And I think that the Eastern from the social network, Guanxi, and the West is through the ability, they meet in the middle of the benevolence. So that would be very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your ideas. I think next one, Guido wants to.
Yeah, thank you. And of course, Peter you've already triggered several things there. And one thing is I've been involved in a study with a Chinese colleague on Chinese entrepreneurs, like startups, and they are starting to behave more like Westerners, we found, but that's another thing. I wanted to say a little bit about Swift Trust as well, but I have to plug also here, I just can't help it, our new project, or the project that my colleague Hendrik Wilhelm acquired recently and started with this project team just a few weeks ago. We are also, or they are also studying the search and rescue training between people on boats and people on helicopters, if I may simplify that. So that's interesting how kind of this research topic is also now something we're interested in. They are not primarily looking at trust, but they are looking also at training and how these people can be trained together and in simulations and how they interact in teamwork. And maybe they will start looking at trust too. But in this context, Swift Trust is mentioned, and also Swift Trust tends to be, let's not forget, a kind of routinized trust. People trust each other just because they wear a helmet or they have a certain kind of red jacket on. They just see, okay, this is the so-and-so guy, and so I can trust him because, you know, the person has been trained in a certain way. I don't maybe even need to see the face. I just know by the badge, this is the pilot. And then, so pilot does the pilot's job, and I will trust him to do that. And that is really Swift Trust. And I've already said a long time ago, I'm not even sure if that should be called trust. And even Meyerson and I'll say it's a very kind of trust, yeah, maybe it's a kind of trusting-like, but it's really about control. It's about predictability, and of course for emergency, predictability is so important. You can't take any risks because people may die, and things have to work. So you want to be super sure. But that's how we all started doing trust research, isn't it? By the fact that you can't be 100% sure. No routine will work all of the time, and no situation will ever be exactly like it was in the training. So improvisation, I think, is really interesting here. And isn't trust all about improvising and about what you do when things are not as expected or when you can't know how they are? And that's why I really have a problem also with the Swift Trust notion, unless we see it, and this comes back to Peter again, as a kind of initial basis for trust. And then relationships really develop, and maybe they even develop swiftly, like even in a rescue operation, if it lasts several hours, the people involved might actually bond quite a lot. But in the first minutes, they just work together because one is wearing that helmet and one has got a pilot badge and the next one has this red jacket that you recognize. And they just know what they have to do initially. But then it gets interesting, and then trust comes a little bit later, I think. So sorry, but I think Swift Trust, actually, I would even like to say, is not trust yet.
Thank you very much. We have a little bit more time for further questions. So is there anyone else? maybe while you're thinking about further questions, I can ask one myself. Anna, thank you also from my side for your interesting presentation. And I have a question regarding the different methods for building trust, because you refer to different methods like this sharing of resources or the IGP method. So you have a lot of different methods. And what I'm interested in is within those networks, I could imagine that there are also some challenges because, of course, when you talk about those methods, I think also in your networks, there are network managers who use and support those methods. So did you also experience different kinds of challenges within those networks where, this kind of methods partly did not work or something like that?
Actually, the biggest challenge was to convince people to meet up, to come, because without people there will be no interaction and no, so that was the biggest challenge. And also we had this some examples of misusing of information, which caused conflicts and withdrawal from the networks. So, but when the processes were up and go, we didn't experience some big challenges along the way. But for instance, from this think tank processes, a lot of the ideas they started to work on, they didn't end in something. But then at least they got different ideas, and they got an increased know-how competence, more connections with more people on different network members. So the biggest risk was to not get kind of an innovation outcome, at least in the first phase. But for instance, some companies they discovered that actually their products could fit very well together, so they can get together in the market to kind of offer a bigger packet together. So different outcomes that wasn't planned, but just that came out from more lunch chats or so things that we didn't measure directly. But no big challenges with running the processes, but the processes were mostly driven by Helge and myself, or one of us. But then, for instance, in the IGP groups, different people in the groups were sharing the group. For instance, the one with the hobby at the first letter in the alphabet was the group leader, and with the last one was the group secretary, and they had to follow the rules that were given on a paper note. So that worked quite well, and some of the networks, they continued to use it after we ended our involvement. And we also saw that some of the managers, they started to use the processes within their company, because they saw that it was efficient and could also be used to develop processes or products within their companies.
Okay, thank you for sharing your experience. We have a direct comment on that. So Björn Ekelund, please go ahead with your comment.
Thank you. Just like Anna, I am from Norway, which implies that my background is in a high trust context. And I've been working with trust interventions for about 20 years and tried out one of these kind of models in the Middle East to see whether it could have the same kind of effect with the Jews and Arabs in the context. And we basically documented that the intervention itself worked likewise. It promotes trust and creativity, independence of cultural background. But these are very, very important questions to be aware. The uniqueness of the high trust society that we have here in Norway. For example, no one has commented the reflexivity that has been very essential in Anna's presentation here. I've been doing study with 93 project leadership teams in Norway, showing that reflexivity is the one and only component that predicts innovation. 3 to 4 times more important than trust, which implies that in a high trust society, it's the more critical processes of reflecting together that make changes and make innovation. But that is given that we have this kind of basic trust, which we have in a society. And I totally agree with Peter that in an Asian context, the social relations is well, more important, and especially compared to the US and more transactional oriented management systems. Norway is though something in between China and US in that kind of context. We also trust people first before we try to understand what we can do together. But thank you, Anna, for presenting what you're doing. It's to do some kind of trust research in networks and network development is a really messy area, because there are so many factors that influence, and there's so few studies that you're able to do consistently. So thank you for your sharing, and I hope we can connect and to be able to learn together more after this kind of seminar. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment. I think Anna wants to answer.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Björn. I will like very much to connect. And thanks for your comments. I also, as I told you, there are people here from the University of Southeastern Norway and from the maritime department where I used to work. And there we have had a lot of courses for maritime companies with the officers, and they have been from very many countries, also from the East. We haven't measured trust, but we have used the network IGP method to sort out what is the main reason for that accidents happens and what can be done to prevent them. So hundreds of officers have done IGP method in small groups during the years, and we have had some data for it that was shared with the company. So at least we found out something. Also they reflected on the method afterwards that perhaps it would be a good idea to use the IGP process also on board. And actually one of them said that actually even if it's a very critical situation, that we have to react very quickly, we can still be on the bridge. If you ask people, think for 30 seconds and then share one sentence from each. So then the captain get more knowledge into the decision of what to do. So actually we don't know if it created trust, but and the most representative national background was people from the Philippines, but it was very international. The whole audience, very few Norwegians. So the IGP method functioned to share knowledge and to find out things together. But if it created trust, we don't know. And they were all from the same company. So they were engaged by the same company, but most of them were engaged on contracts with a agency firm, so they were not directly hired.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? If not, I would like to thank you, Anne, for this interesting insights and for being our guest and for taking your time. It was really a pleasure to have you here today. And also thank you to all of our guests for being here and for your questions. And now I would like to give on to Guido for the final.
Thanks so much, Tina, for chairing, for moderating the session. I also thought it was very interesting, especially also the talk, but also afterwards the questions shows that we still have a lot to discuss. So Anne, very, very many thanks to you for giving us the opportunity to talk about trust, about networks, about innovation. It was a really nice evening together with all of you. I would just, by closing now, like to plug a book, because we did talk about different trust levels, and there's a very new book, Understanding Trust in Organizations, a multi-level perspective, edited by Nicole Gillespie, Ashley Fulmer, and Roy Lewicki. And there are 2 chapters in there specifically on networks that I can strongly recommend. But also, of course, yeah, there are a lot of interesting other things in there, especially if you're also trying to study trust at different levels, or you're agreeing that trust does involve different levels. So, and I'm plugging here for other colleagues. I have only a very small contribution in the book. I know, so it's not shameless advertising, it's collegial promotion. Of course. Well, then I would also like to just mention one more time, Anna, because you more pointed it out, the new collaboration between our universities. That's really great. So best regards to colleagues in Kristiania. We hope that this pandemic will be over soon, so that we can visit each other, really exchange ideas in person and not just online or via emails. So I'm very happy that we had this occasion today, but hopefully soon it will not be online anymore only. And then I would like to invite all of you to our next online research seminar. So we've already had one before today on supply chain poverty settings, Eugenia Roska from Tilburg. And the next one will be Hanna Trittin Ulbrich from Leuphana University, that's in Germany, in Lüneburg. And her topic is, of course, also very current, and digitalization and responsibility, corporate digital responsibility, and she has various projects at the moment in this area, and we look forward to her update and first insights. So thanks everybody again once more, especially Anna, and all of you who are here tonight, this evening, all of you who commented and asked questions. It was a great experience, and we look forward to seeing you all somewhere at our own events here at the RMI, at the next international conferences, and especially, as I said, soon enough in person if possible. Goodbye and have a great evening, all of you. It was very nice to see you. Bye-bye.